Right. Well, it's right on the hour. I think we're um, ready to get started, and not to make anybody jealous, but we've got rain right now, and so it's in the low 70s for the first time in quite a long time. But prior today, we were sweating just like everyone else. So, but we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to this Kendall Hunt webinar. My name is Megan. I work here at Kendall Hunt, and we are going to talk today about the freshman is off to college. Now what? So, what you might not have known kind of before today is that there's actually six key areas of adjustment that first year students generally face. So, what are those? How do you appropriately support your young adult as they experience this whirlwind of change? Well, that is what we're going to talk about today. So, whether you're here today with us and you are a parent or whether you are an educator, student success is the goal. And so, we are going to dive into it. And before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping points. We will be drawing three winners at the end of this webinar for Lori and Stephanie's upcoming publication, Your Freshman is Off to College, a month-by-month guide to the first year. And there's a super kind of fun bent on that. So I'll let Lori and Stephanie explain that later. So if you're interested in winning that, stay on till the end of the webinar and you might just win a free book. But whether or not you win the drawing, we also have a lovely PDF of resources that kind of encapsulate everything we're talking about today. That's a fantastic sort of like quick reference guide that you can refer to throughout the whole next year for your freshmen. And so everyone will get access to that. This webinar is being recorded. We will send that out in the coming days as well. And we will have a dedicated Q&A time at the end of the webinar. So if at any point you have a question, feel free to throw that in either the chat or the Q&A function, and we'll address it at the end. But I would be remiss if I didn't, introduce our speakers today. We have Dr. Lori Hazard with us, and she's an education expert with over 30 years of experience helping students succeed in college. She's won numerous national awards for her work with first-year students, and she's been featured in the Washington Post and in 17 magazine. And as a former assistant dean for student success and the author of books like Foundations for Learning and Habits of Mind for Success in College, Lori brings groundbreaking insights on student transformations, parent involvement, creating thriving college experiences from orientation through graduation. Now, Stephanie Carter with us today is the Director of Tutoring and Writing Centers at the Community College of Rhode Island. She's a leader in student success with over 25 years of experience. She specializes in helping first-year students and families navigate that transition from high school to college, which can be really tricky. So having worked in classrooms and residence halls and learning centers, Stephanie has not only the scholarly expertise, but also the practical knowledge of how to create supportive environments where students can really thrive both academically and personally. It is really hard to have one without the other. So a couple of glowing resumes with us today. And so I'm super excited to hear. Lori, Stephanie, I'll hand it over to you. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thanks, Megan.
Welcome, everyone. We're so excited to be here with you today and share some information that parents and families can really leverage and utilize to support their students. And if you are an educator, I think you're going to find some actionable advice that you can share with those who work with your first year students. And if you teach a first year seminar or a college success class, I think some of the information in here will support your pedagogy and teaching.
Hey, Lori, I'm working on the forwarding.
All righty. So first, for parents and families and supporters and partners of college students, we want to say congratulations. As parents who have been through the journey ourselves, when that high school graduation comes, there is that feeling and that sigh of relief that they made it, and that feeling of pride. And now I think you might be moving into that trepidation stage of sending them off to college, and we'd like to help you ease whatever angst you might be experiencing. So we just want to acknowledge right from the beginning that there are so many stakeholders in students' orbits that support students to be successful. And we understand that family comes in various forms, and college students really need everybody in their orbits to support them and understand what the college transition is like, especially when things get difficult. And they will have challenges no matter how successful they were in their secondary education experience. So we're here to work with you to celebrate their wins. And this webinar really is for everybody who is in the circle, the orbit, the family of first-year college students. So here's our lofty goals for today. So we're going to really try to situate you into the interior lives and the minds of first-year students, and really help you understand what the first-year college experience is like for students. You know, parents who may have gone to college are a long way away from that experience. So we want to really, like I said, help everybody build empathy for those challenges and what it might be like in the first year. And we are going to talk about a theoretical framework that Stephanie and I developed called the 6 major areas of college adjustment, and how those really mediate the experience for first-year students. And we're also going to talk about the challenges that students face on a monthly basis as they traverse that first year. And we also understand that the college transition affects everybody in the family, not just the students. And we want to talk about some of the transition issues that families might experience as they're helping to support their students' health and well-being. And we do want to talk about parent types and parent approaches. And how there are strategies and ways in which you can really support your students from a healthy distance and really strike that balance between kind of guiding and coaching them through, and not interfering and getting too over involved. So you have a powerful role here to play in your student success. And it's your job, and I want you to partner with the colleges and universities that you're sending your students to do what's happening inside the university, which is we are helping encourage students' resilience and confidence and belonging. And we're going to talk to you about how to do that, but from a healthy distance, since you won't be there with your student. So I want to take this from a psychology perspective, from a developmental psychology perspective. I want to talk about how this idea of the psychology of adjustment takes time. And we're all in different developmental stages, and we traverse through different developmental stages throughout our lives. And I just want to mention that I am centered here in the middle-age stage of development, and it has been an adjustment. And I want to tell you here that I wear bifocals. I hate having glasses on my face. It's been a huge adjustment, but I have to get over it and put them on because I'm having a little bit of trouble seeing the slides here. So adjusting to this idea that I'm a middle-aged woman is taken me some time. Adjustment and change takes time, and so too will that take time for your students to adjust to this idea of becoming a young adult. So first I want to talk about the definition of psychology to kind of ground our discussion. So psychology is the study of behaviors. That's anything that's observable that we can see. So I'm sure that you're observing that, you know, I've got a little bit of Italian in my background. I'm using hand gestures. I talk with my hands quite a bit, so you can make those observations. Webinars are challenging because I can't read your body language. So the behavior part is what we do, what is observable. The mental processes are how we think, how we feel, and how we perceive the world around us. So I don't know if some of you are thinking, I hope this webinar ends promptly at 2 o'clock because I've got a meeting right after that, or I've got something else that I need to do. I don't know if some of you are feeling hungry because you didn't have anything to eat before you hopped on. Those are things that I can't see. What personality psychologists say is that a healthy personality is when a person or an individual's behaviors and mental processes are congruent. That is, they match. And humans can only propel toward their goals if they have that congruence with that behavior piece, and the mental processes piece. So I do want to share an analogy with you to kind of drive this home. And then I will shift it over to a student analogy, but this analogy works. So a number of years ago, I had some friends of mine challenge me to run a 5K. And what happens when people are presented with goals or something that they're asked to do? So picture a student being asked to read a chapter of a book. So I was presented with this challenge of running a 5K, and I immediately went to how I think about myself and my self-concept. So those thoughts, right? And I thought to myself, oh my God, I am not a runner. I can't run a 5K. But then I realized that I didn't have all the information because I didn't know the metric system. So I asked somebody, I'm like, what is a 5K anyway? I needed information to determine whether or not I could reach that goal. And then somebody told me it was 3.2 miles. So oftentimes what happens with human beings is if we're challenged with something, we start gathering information, and then we do what is called in psychology, we assess our self-efficacy. And that's a fancy way of saying, can I do it? So I was thinking to myself, can I do it? Can I run 3.1 miles? So then we go back in our Rolodex and we say, okay, have I had that experience before? And I thought, well, yes, I had that experience of running a 5K when I was in college, because I was on the tennis team and we used to have to run 3 miles before practice. But then my mental processes and my negative attitudes got in the way, and I thought, oh my God, I can run a 5K, but that was the worst part about being on the tennis team, is having to run before practice. I don't know if I want to do it, but there is a little competitiveness in my personality. So I thought, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to start enacting the behavior of running the 5K. But the whole time that I'm doing it, so here's my behavior. My thoughts were like, oh my God, who does this for fun? I thought you got high when you ran. When is the runner's high going to come? I'll keep going if the adrenaline kicks in and I get that feeling, but this is awful. And I'm like, oh my God, my knee hurts. So while I was enacting the behavior, the thoughts, feelings, and attitudes were never congruent. So I want to pose a question to all of you. Do you think that I finished the 5K? And Megan, you got to let me know what people are chatting in. How many yeses and nos we've got there? So people are saying yes. A lot of people saying, some people are saying no.
I got one no. Most yeses, actually. I think two
Yeah.
no's, and they
All
would
right.
probably not.
Okay. So the people who are saying yes, you're right. You know why? And this is what I say to students. Sometimes you got to fake it until you make it. You got to persevere and do things that you don't feel like doing and you don't want to do. And that's going to happen with them in college. They may be presented with an 80-page chapter, and they're going to have to figure out a way to get through that chapter and enact that behavior of reading, even though they feel like they're not interested in the subject matter, or they're nervous about the topic. Right? So what happens is in college, students are going to have to adjust those mental processes and those mindsets in order to enact the strategies in their academics that are going to help them be successful. So I want to talk about how, if we're thinking about traditional age students, they are in the middle of a developmental shift from adolescents to emerging adults to young adults, and we're going to talk about the nuances of those developmental stages. And it takes time. They leave their secondary education experience with that self-concept of I am a high school student, and it's going to take them a little bit of time before that self-concept and that identity shifts to I am a college student. It could possibly take the whole first year. So we're going to talk about how you can support your adolescent and your young adult through that developmental shift and ease that developmental stage for them. So I want to talk about this idea of a new developmental stage. So I was talking from a personality psychology perspective a couple of minutes ago, and now I want to talk from a developmental psychology perspective. So our traditional way of thinking about how the ages and stages of life unfold is that young people go from childhood to adolescence. This is the traditional way we thought about it. This is what is taught in developmental psychology classes in school typically. Then they go from young adulthood, then to middle adulthood, then to late adulthood. Well, now in the last 30 years, developmental psychologists have been really thinking about there is this new developmental stage. So now we want to conceptualize it as from childhood to adolescent to emerging adulthood to young adulthood, then to middle adulthood, then to late adulthood. So we're going to really be talking about this emergent adulthood stage because for many of our traditional age students, that's where they're at right now. And that's the stage they'll be moving through as they traverse through their first year of college and until graduation. So this developmental stage, the term was coined by Arnett. He is a psychologist at Clark University in Worcester. So he's just an hour down the road here from me and Stephanie. And he describes emergent adulthood at this stage between 18 and 25. When young people, they're no longer teenagers, but they're not quite settled into adult roles yet. So if we beg the question of what are the markations of adulthood, we might say, oh, when young adults are paying their own bills. And then some of you might be thinking, well, my college student isn't paying their cell phone bill yet, ... So they're not a young adult, they're an emergent adult. Maybe by the time they graduate in their first job, they'll take that bill away from you. Why this stage has gotten a lot of attention is because of the external sociocultural environment outside of higher education, right? There have been social and economic shifts, right? So if I think about my mother started her family at 20, one generation later, I started my family at 34. People are waiting longer to marry and start having families, right? So there's been that huge shift in what's called the social clock. And many young adults are now deciding to attend college as part of this kind of extended developmental stage. And emergent adulthood can kind of help you have a little bit of context to, that time period where I know as parents and mothers and fathers, I keep thinking, I cannot wait for both of my children to get a job, to have health insurance, and they're supporting themselves, right? That's sort of the end of emergent adulthood when that happens. So I've got one just about there, and I'm very impatiently actually waiting for the other one to get there. That's a whole other story and perhaps a whole other webinar. So we want to dive in right now to this idea of the college transition focused on these 6 areas of adjustment. Again, it's this developmental framework that Stephanie and I developed really to help parents, families, professors, administrators, stakeholders who are interested in students being successful in college to really understand that college transition and what young adults, emergent adults are going through as they're readying themselves to go off to college. So there are 6 key areas of adjustment for first-year college students. And so the academic adjustment is really focused on the extent to which students are prepared academically, right? How much they're willing to shift their high school study strategies and start using college study strategies, how academically prepared they are. The social adjustment is really around this idea of what we call a sense of belongingness and acceptance in colleges and universities. So for the students to really find that peer group that they fit into and those abilities to work in groups if they have group projects in college, and really developing what I would call those interpersonal skills, how well they get along with others, which is a dimension of emotional intelligence. That emotional adjustment is really that emotional coping that students will experience as they're moving away from college. So for example, homesickness might be an emotional adjustment that students have to make. And this is really related to what we call intrapersonal skills, how well students know themselves. So the better students know themselves well, and they have those intrapersonal skills, the better they are going to be able to apply those emotional coping mechanisms. Intellectual adjustment is around this idea of learning new things and having those kind of epiphanies or epochal experiences that you have in college when you learn something new and it blows your mind. And you have to really think about, how is this new information I'm learning going to integrate and fit into my value system? Cultural adjustment is related to living and learning with others who are quite different from us, and really understanding and appreciating the richness that you get to experience when you're meeting people from all over the world, perhaps. And that's really about helping students develop their cultural intelligence. And the financial adjustment is, well, I don't know how much money these young people have in the banks before they're going off, or if they've ever had to manage their money before, or if they've had to work when they're going off to school. So financial adjustment really is that process of taking on responsibility for understanding, for example, how they might finance their college education. So we're going to dive in a little bit deeper to these 6 areas of adjustment. And while there are a lot of factors that are aligned with each of the areas of adjustment, we've chosen to focus on some of the top 3 or 4 that the literature identifies as really emerges as perhaps the most challenging for students. So the academic adjustment, I already talked a little bit about reading, and while reading is not on here, I do want to mention reading because we know that a lot of our students are digital natives. I'm a digital immigrant. I went off to college with a typewriter. We know that this generation of students is what we call illiterate. It's not that they can't read, which is illiterate. It's that they don't do the same kind of sustained focused reading that students in college did a generation or so ago. So students really have to think about how they're going to tackle that reading workload, because in college classes, books really are one of the main pedagogical tools that professors still use to deliver their content. So I'd be remiss, I think, if I didn't mention reading, only because the literature has boomed in this area in the last year. You probably saw a lot of articles in the Chronicle of Higher Education, The Atlantic, all of these publications that people are sort of white knuckling it and saying, what are we going to do? This generation isn't reading. Perhaps one of the strongest predictors of college achievement is something called self-regulatory behaviors. You might have heard the term executive functioning skills. So self-regulatory behaviors are those behaviors related to time and behavior management. And I like to call it behavior management because you really can't manage time. That's a misnomer, right? There are only 60 minutes in an hour. That's never gonna change. So time and behavior management, that ability to combat procrastination, the ability to self-motivate when you don't feel like doing something. And we talked about that with the running analogy, right? You got to self-motivate even though you don't feel like it, and the ability to set goals. And while the research studies vary, many of the research studies say that these self-regulatory behaviors predict college achievement with about 35% variance, 25 to 35% variance. So what that's really saying is if we think about the 100% of factors that go into college success, about 25 to 35% of them are around these self-regulatory behaviors. So, for parents in the audience, I want you to reflect on the extent to which your children are procrastinators, because that does portend some extra challenges during the first year. Of course, students are going to have to cultivate relationships with professors. And this is a little bit different than the kinds of relationships that they might cultivate with their secondary education or high school teachers. And it's going to take more proactive efforts on their part. And that's where those interpersonal skills will come in again, that ability to reach out to those professors, ask for help, and develop relationships with them. Because let's think about it. Those professors are going to be writing those letters of recommendation, at the other end of this experience during senior year. And of course, we know that the workload in college is significantly higher than the workload in high school. There's something called the Carnegie Standard in college, and we in terms of norming expectations of how much work students will have to put in, it's about 2 to 3 hours outside of the classroom. So we're talking about a full-time job experience for students. So the academic adjustment can be challenging. And then the social adjustment is really, again, building those peer relationships. And so it's a starting over for students, right? They're going to be meeting new people. And if they are in that emergent adulthood stage of development, or they're moving out of adolescence into that emergent adulthood, that stage of development is really marked by peer pressure, right? And that need to fit in. And so I often say to parents, there's no mistake that procrastinators recruit other students to procrastinate with them. And why is that, right? It's because students don't want to go down the rabbit hole together, right? If a student is in their residence hall room working, I might run in and say, hey, you want to come into my room and play Xbox, and the student is trying to withstand the peer pressure and they think, why not? My test isn't for another 2 days. I'll go waste 3 hours doing Xbox. So it's really hard for students to withstand that peer pressure. And I always say to students, it's no mistake that the probation students are sitting together in the cafeteria, right? All the students who end up with below a 2.0 have been hanging out all semester. So not only is the social adjustment about building those peer relationships in college, but their relationships with their family at home and their friends are going to shift significantly. And sometimes students will feel like, particularly commuter students, might feel like they're really straddling two worlds, right? They're trying to build those relationships with the new people that they're meeting, cultivate relationships with professors, faculty, staff, and administration, but maybe they've also got significant responsibilities at home still. So they're really kind of straddling those two worlds. So moving on to intellectual adjustment. I think one of the anecdotes that I can share with you that really illustrates the intellectual adjustment is when I took a women's studies class in college, and all right, I'll tell you how old I am here. It was in 1984, fall of 1984. And I learned in this women's studies class that women were making 78 cents for every dollar that their male counterparts were making. And I remember the wide eyes and the tongue hanging out and the face. And I was like, what? How could this be possible? Why would a woman be making less than a man? And then all of a sudden, it sort of shifted my values. And I'm like, this isn't equal. Why isn't this equal? And it was that apocalypse experience that I described, that epiphany. And then all of a sudden, a feminist or a humanist was born, and I thought I need to do something about social justice. So that really shifted my values and changed my behaviors, because I must have been living in a little bubble before that. It's really hard for students to answer that question, what should I do with my life? And oftentimes, and this can be a very good and powerful thing, students are taking such interesting classes. This happened to me. I took a linguistics class and I was a psychology major. And when I took a linguistics class, I was like, oh, I wish I had majored in linguistics. I really like this. What should I do now? So it is this time for exploration, identity exploration, and really figuring out what should I do with my life. And this idea of taking calculated risks. Study abroad, I think, is a great example of taking calculated risks. I went off to England to do study abroad when I was in college. I really should have gone to France because I had taken a lot of French classes and I was really gaining French proficiency, but I was too nervous to take classes in another language. So while I did take the calculated risk of studying abroad, I did yield to safety a little bit and went to an English-speaking country. So you are going to be coaching and counseling your students through those decision points when they say, which road should I take? So that is the intellectual adjustment. And I am going to turn over the other 3 areas of adjustment to Stephanie.
All right, thanks, Lori. So yes, I'll talk a little bit more about the other 3 areas of adjustment, and then we're going to turn back a little bit to how families can support students with these adjustment issues. So next is the emotional adjustment. And one of the key changes that students may experience is their stress level and their ability to regulate it. If they're living away from home, or if they're commuters and they're spending the majority of their time on campus, their life has really changed, right? Their day-to-day lifestyle is changing. And the way they manage stress in the past may need to change. So they might not be seeing their bestie in between classes as they did throughout high school, where they can have someone they can talk to, right? And we know that stress is can also relate to anxiety and other mental health challenges that students have. So students really need to work on how they're managing their stress in a healthy way. And colleges try to find lots of opportunities to teach students about stress and provide them ways to manage their stress effectively. So this sometimes rises a little bit more as the first semester goes on, because in those first early weeks, they may be on an emotional high for some students. They're like, this is great, I love college, this is exactly what I've been working for. And they have a little bit of a honeymoon stage. And then as the rigors of their academics continue to increase in the way that Lori was talking about, that's when they may really start feeling stress. On the other hand, we know for some of our residential students, the idea of homesickness, that can set in pretty early, and that can be a real hurdle that they need to overcome. Homesickness is really common. Students sometimes, they may miss the whole concept of home, right? The comforts of their room, the ease of being able to just go to the refrigerator when they're hungry. And some, they're really missing those relationships. So being around their family every day, or even their family pet, right? So homesickness and managing the emotions that come along with that is part of the emotional adjustment. Next is the cultural adjustment. And so every college or university has its own culture, right? We can think of a community having a culture, having sort of an atmosphere or an experience that many people share in common. So your students, high school students, are coming to college. They're leaving the K through 12 culture, the culture of their high school or their town, and they're coming to this new environment. And for many of them, the level of diversity in the student body could be really different from what they experienced in high school. So some students may be coming from a really small town where everybody in their high school, they've known them their whole lives, and everybody sort of was from a similar socioeconomic background, for instance. And then they come to college and they're around people from all over the world, and their minds are open to different life experiences and different cultures and backgrounds that their classmates, as well as the faculty and staff that they're working with, bring to this new community. For other students, it can be the exact opposite. They could feel that they had a very diverse high school, or they're used to living in a big city, for instance, and they come to college and they may feel that the culture there is really more homogenous than what they're used to. So regardless of what's happening or what the culture of their new school is, that will take a little bit of adjusting. Sometimes during that experience, they may start noticing language differences, even accents. They might start tuning into accents. I remember when I went to college, I am from Rhode Island, and I went all the way to New Hampshire, and I never knew I had an accent till I went to college in New Hampshire, and everyone noticed how differently I spoke. So language differences, as minor as regional accents and as large as multilingual people being around and hearing different languages in the day-to-day is part of the cultural adjustment. And then finally, because of students coming into this new culture, they sometimes realize that they've had belief systems that they've never really challenged or thought about before. Maybe they've been always had a certain stereotype in the back of their minds. And then when they get to meet someone who's different from them, they say, oh my gosh, I sort of made assumptions about a certain group of people, and they find that that's not actually accurate. So the cultural adjustment is one that often takes throughout the first semester as students continue to meet other students and faculty and staff in their classes, as well as whatever they may choose to get involved in during their first year. And then finally, the financial adjustment. And so Lori alluded to this a little bit. This could be the first time that our students are understanding that they have a certain amount of money, and that money needs to last over the course of the semester or the year. They may be bombarded with credit card ads and have to understand a little bit more about the financial literacy facts that align with credit cards, understanding interest rates and credit ratings and those types of things. They may very actively be involved in the financial aid process. So the FAFSA, the financial aid process of applying for financial aid, happens typically before a student goes to college, but then throughout that first year, students need to be aware of whatever GPA they may need to maintain to keep their grant or their scholarships, for example. And they may need to keep in mind the certain details or deadlines for applying for their sophomore years. So financial aid can feel really overwhelming to students until they sort of better understand what's going on with that. And then finally, I wanted to mention the idea of holding a job. So our latest research shows that students who are working during their college experience typically do not have a negative, that doesn't have a negative impact on their overall GPAs. So sometimes holding a job for some students gives them some additional structure in their day and their week. And it can also, if the job is an on-campus position, it could be one of those ways that the student starts to feel more comfortable and connected to their community. So typically the research shows that students working up to 20 hours a week are able to balance that along with their academics. But every student is different and every academic program is different. So that decision about whether to have a job while taking courses is one that may be weighing on them as part of their financial adjustment. So all of these 6 areas of adjustment that Lori and I have developed, they really align pretty closely with Brower's. Brower is a higher ed researcher, and he identified 7 life tasks for our first year college students. And so as you're looking through this, you may see some that really fit in with what we've just been talking about, whether the making friends as part of the social adjustment or establishing future goals in relation to the intellectual adjustment. So all of these are tasks that students complete as they're moving through their first year. And what Lori and I have been looking a little bit more closely at is what are the tasks for family members? So if we have this set of tasks for students, for our first year students, what are the tasks for family members of first year students? And you'll see some of these do overlap. But the first is that as our students go off to college, the level of responsibility or involvement that we have will shift. Whether the student is living on campus or living at home, the way that we're connecting with them and supporting them is going to change. It also changes our own identity as we have college students. So I remember feeling like things had really shifted in my household when I had both of my my daughters in college at the same time. I was starting to feel a little bit like I was having this empty nest experience, but with the birdies flying home every few weeks for different holidays and weeks off. So my identity and starting to think about our family dynamic, that shifts as students are entering into their first year. And with that, many family members sometimes say, okay, this huge task of supporting my student through their K through 12 experience and getting them to college, this was one of my major life goals. I am proud that I've gotten them there. So now what's the next chapter of my life looking like? And that may also involve some changing social relationships. So a good friend of mine, when her daughter went away to college, she mentioned that she really missed the experience of connecting with her daughter's friends' families. Her daughter was on a soccer team for most of her life, and so those families had gotten together all the time. And while they could still get together without their daughters, it really did change the social relationships and became part of the adjustment for college families in that group. And then finally, the whole idea of managing our own emotional adjustment. How do we handle our students' emerging independence? And how do we manage the worry that we may be feeling when our students are going through difficulties? So Lori and I have talked before about getting a text from one of our college students in the morning where it sounds like there's a major crisis, and we're worried about this all day. And then at the end of the day, we get a text and clearly everything's fine and it worked out. But our emotions were impacted as that day went on by our concern and trying to figure out how to support our student with this perceived worry or perceived concern.
Yeah, you're only as happy as your most miserable kid, isn't it? The old adage says.
Amen. So we would be remiss if we didn't talk a little bit about the term helicopter parent. So often when Lori and I have talked with parents of new college students or incoming college students, they say, I don't want to be a helicopter parent. I don't want to be that person, right? So that has a stereotype that's been instilled in people and that, that parents often worry about. And so research shows that, yeah, being a helicopter parent can have a negative impact on a student's experience. So researchers sort of define helicopter parenting as being invasive, overly protective, and overly involved, right? Not necessarily letting students make their decisions or make the moves to make a change or an improvement on their own. And so the research shows that this decreases student autonomy, right? So their own sense of independence decreases when if they feel like their parent is being overly invasive or overly protective. And it can also decrease their self-confidence, right? They think this isn't something I can manage on my own. I need somebody else to step in. On the other side, there's a term coined that you can think almost as a good alternative to a helicopter parent, and that's the autonomy supportive parenting style. So that's really working in collaboration with our student, treating them like the emerging adults that they are, supporting them from a healthy distance and helping them problem solve and letting them know we're there to support them. And the research shows that this parenting style creates greater self-efficacy, right? So students feel that they have the ability to be effective and to have positive outcomes on their own. Persistence, meaning continuation from semester to semester, and greater engagement along with higher GPAs, right? So we see that there's a positive academic correlation as well. We know research shows that there are some key aspects of family involvement. So a positive family involvement has a huge impact on a student's ability to be successful. So first, it creates emotional and cultural capital, right? So a family's traditions, their beliefs, their values that they've shared with their students for their whole lives, students are taking that with them to college, and it makes them feel grounded. They have something to think back on when they're trying to make decisions, and they'll feel connected to their families. There's also the emotional support, right, of being encouraging and listening. Sometimes that's the most important thing that our students want from us, is just to kind of listen to what's going on, especially when they're stressed. In addition, it's the family involvement can create resilience. So many students say that because they know their family believes in them, that helps them when they come across a hurdle or something difficult. And that when the support from home is positive and not overly invasive, that it really helps students feel like that a failure isn't a big thing and that they can continue moving through it, right? So feeling resilient and feeling like they can overcome the problems that they may be experiencing. So all this to say that Lori and I have been trying over the last many years to pull together all of the most important information that we think families could benefit from so that they can be autonomy supportive parents in working with their first year college student. And so we have this book that will be available next month. It's called Your Freshman is Off to College, a month-by-month guide to the first year. And so we wanted to take just a couple minutes to tell you a little bit more about it. And as Megan mentioned, she will be doing a drawing for a few copies of this book. So the book is laid out. Each chapter has covers a different month, and we'll tell you a little bit more about that in a moment. And we really try to highlight the 6 key areas of adjustment and the situations that arise in relation to those areas of adjustment. We also help identify some common challenges and key milestones that happen over the course of the first year and give some examples of what students may be experiencing. And one of the most important things, one of the things we really love about this book is we help families understand the key campus resources that support students with the 6 areas of adjustment. So instead of families feeling like they need to step in, they can advise and coach their students about the resources available to them with the ultimate goal of helping you support your students from a healthy distance. Lori, was there anything else you wanted to say here before I jump to the next slide?
No, I do love that you said that the book really is designed to help parents evolve into autonomy supportive parents if they're not already. I just really love that connection. And I was also thinking about other similar books that are written by college administrators related to the first year of college, or they're written by parents or moms, a lot of them. But the uniqueness of our book, I think, is that we bring both of those worlds together. And it really is designed to help really educate the parents of how to support their students and sort of silently partner with the university, because they'll have the inside track of, if my student's having trouble with emotional adjustment, what key resource on campus would help the student with that. So you can tell we're really excited about this here.
Yes. So I wanted to show you just a quick example. So each month of the first year has a chapter of its own, and we really try to give an overview of the key themes of that month. So you can see for May, it says a month for wrapping up and looking ahead, academic needs, living transitions, final exams, and summer plans on the horizon, right? So those are some of the key factors that often come into play during that last month of the semester. We follow it with a letter home, and we will say that the letter home is what a student would write if they were being very frank, right? So this is a letter that really sort of highlights some of the behaviors, feelings, perceptions, and emotions that our first year students feel. And then we follow it with a list of some patterned common challenges that our young adults may experience during this month. So we thought with the first month of college being right around the corner, we would just give this information to you related to some of college students' challenges in their first month or first weeks of the semester. And so I'll give you a moment to look at them. And again, this doesn't mean every student has every one of these experiences, but these are common experiences that often occur in patterns across the first month of college. Lori, are there any that really jump out at you that you notice a great deal with first year students?
I mean, I often, and this is a little regional example, but we are in the state of Rhode Island. It's known as the Ocean State. There are lots of beaches around here. And so if you look at the second bullet point there, if you will, experience a new level of freedom, lots of unstructured time. So typically college students are in classes about 3 hours a day. And I feel like in our region, students are like, I get out of class at 12. I'm heading to the beach just to go surfing. And they don't think about all of the outside work they need to be doing. And this is really jolting, right? Because in secondary education and high school, they're in school for 6 hours. They may have after school activities. Their time is really structured. And now they think 3 hours a day, this is fantastic. So that is it feels wonderful for students in that honeymoon stage, but it is something that absolutely has to be reeled in, discussed, talked about, because they need to be doing something outside of those 3 hours of classes to prepare. So that's a biggie, I think.
Yeah, I agree. The perception of free time, the faulty perception of free time.
The illusion or
Yes,
delusion.
the last one makes me think so much of that whole experience of culture shock. The idea of being around people and being like, these people are not for me. Everything is so different. Maybe I made the wrong choice. Maybe I'm not going to find any new friends, or I'm not going to really feel connected to this school. And I think lots of students have that experience in those first few weeks of feeling the culture shock of being in this new environment.
Yeah, and that really I'm not going to find my people. And I think it's important to mention there is culture shock literature that's related to the college adjustment, and often that honeymoon phase of this is great, this is fun, everything's new. That culture shock kind of sets in at week 3. So the nice thing about our book is it kind of goes through the ebbs and flows of the first year and those hot spots where students may be feeling challenges that arise, and it will help you do what we call in psychology anticipatory problem solving. So sort of don't be surprised if things are going just dandy in week 3, you're getting the homesickness phone call. I think somebody raised their hand. I saw a little flash on the screen.
Yeah. Maybe we'll jump to the next slide, and then I think we have a little time for Q&A. So
that was great.
So before we turn things back over to Megan for the drawing and for some questions and answers, we just wanted to kind of feel like we were summing up some of the things that we've mentioned or alluded to as you're thinking about supporting your student from a healthy distance. So you'll see that it's really so much about listening and encouraging and coaching, and trying to make sure that you understand the resources and what's going on in the student's college experience, so that when they ask for advice, you can give it, and that you can help them build their confidence and their self-advocacy skills. So self-advocacy also means asking for help. And that you're working on just keeping the communication open with them, while also giving them the freedom and the respect for their need for space or their need for making their own decisions. So being the autonomy, supportive family member that they need to be successful. So Megan, I wanted, sorry.
I was going to say, and that we always say, like, to parents and families, rest assured there are experts on the college campus that can help students with all of these adjustment issues. So instead of like, you want to resist the urge to interfere, right? You can point them back into the direction of the experts on campus that are eager really to help support them through this transition.
I will say, as one of the kind of like perks of working behind the scenes is I was like reading your guys' manuscript pages, and I don't have kids going to college, but I was like, wow, this is really entertaining and be super helpful. You know, it'll be things like, Dad, my roommate's a slob. Like, he just throws his laundry everywhere. Like, I can't live with this guy. You know, kind of these little like fictional scenarios like that. And then also like real answers of like, here is how you can advise your student. Here is how you can like actually give support. And you know, it has things as kind of like seemingly small as that, but might be a big deal to your kid. And then also like far bigger issues that could involve.
Oh, Megan,
like,
these aren't fictional scenarios. All of the scenarios Stephanie and I experienced with students.
Well, I stand corrected.
Yeah.
Thanks for clarifying that.
It's not fictional. It's real, baby.
Do we have now any questions? Burning questions about the fall college semester coming up, and how you can support students, or anything else you're interested in? I'll get started just to grease the groove a little bit. With any of your kind of tips and feedback that you guys give, do you get any like pushback on any particular points, and why do you think that is?
I think that it's sometimes just a mindset shift for parents. They've learned their whole lives that a good parent is involved. A good parent knows everything that's going on, knows when the homework is due. And so I think when parents send their students to college, they're like, what? I can't see all of their homework assignments. I can't sign them up for their major. And so I think it's just an initial discomfort of, wow, what it means to be a good parent has really shifted. And it's going to be okay that I can't get in and see whether they handed in their paper on time. So that would be one thing that I've noticed over the years.
Nice. And then we do have a couple of questions starting to filter in now. What suggestions do you guys have dealing with homesickness?
So one of the things I think is helpful is to really get a temperature reading or an assessment of what I would call the student's stress tolerance. So to kind of find out how homesick they are. And I've often done sort of calendar therapy with students where we'll look at the calendar, and if they live close enough to campus, really kind of encourage them to stay on campus, because the antidote for homesickness, it's counterintuitive. It's the opposite, right? They really should be staying on campus, getting engaged. So so many different pieces of advice, and this is in the book. One is to have them reach out and talk to their resident assistant if they're living on campus, because there are residence assistants that live in the residence halls that are really, they're peer advisors, and they're really equipped to help students deal with homesickness. The other thing is to encourage your student to identify at least 3 activities that they might want to be involved in, and encourage them to connect to the president of that club or organization or attend that club or organization meeting. If they're in such distress, well, we want to discourage them from coming home, because what's going to happen if they come home is they're not going to be making the connections at college to make them feel less lonely and less homesick. We might have to make an agreement with them. Okay, it's okay if you come home the weekend of week 3 of the semester, right? When that culture shock experience is happening. So really, I've done a lot of work with parents saying, like, can we bridge your student to week 3 and then have them come back for 2 weeks? And then can we bridge them to week 6? I have a good little video that talks about addressing college students' loneliness and homesickness. And we do have a Facebook page for our book. And almost every day I'm posting advice on that Facebook page. And you can, if you go on to It's Your Freshman is Off to College Facebook page, you can watch the video on helping your college student address loneliness or homesickness. It is hard for parents to resist the temptation to jump in and save. You might also want to try creating a communication campaign with your students. Say, we'll talk every night at 6 o'clock, and just kind of create that social support or touchstones for them. But try not to have them come home if at all possible. But you do have to, like I said, figure out what their distress or stress tolerance is, because some of them might not be able to take it, and they might have to go home just to get patched back up, only to go back to school.
Excellent. Another question we have is a tough one. How do you support students who experience the death of a parent just before classes begin?
Yeah. Well, you're bringing up, things that we've experienced as practitioners in our roles at our college or university. And, I certainly would keep them in touch with their therapist at home, if you still have the ability to do that. If your student is too far away, I would put counseling in place for them immediately and get the appointment set up before they even arrive to campus, which you can do. And also, I would look for support groups in the area and in the community surrounding the college if the college itself doesn't have those types of support groups. And in that case, I would probably do a little bit more with allowing the student to come home and have more frequent check-ins. Stephanie, I don't know if you have anything to add. That is such a,
Mhm.
it's a heartbreaking
Yeah.
experience.
My one other thing would be to really help the student identify some staff or faculty member that they could talk to just let them know what's going on with them, so that if something came up and there was a major decision to make, that somebody already knows them. So it could be the student's academic advisor setting an appointment with the advisor early, just to get to know them, but also to share a little bit of what's going on, that what they're dealing with. And that person can also be a touchstone for them if they're struggling in some other way, not necessarily as a therapist or a counselor, but someone who understands the college and could make sure that the student understands their options if they needed to drop a class or something like that.
Excellent. We have a little bit of a conversation in the chat as well. Leslie says, as a professor who teaches predominantly first-year students, I've noticed a dip in reading proficiency over the past few years. Lori referred to students as illiterate. I understand the concepts of how we read has changed, but what are your thoughts about how reading was taught in the early grades? Lack of phonics or science-based reading. And then Laura, who is a reading specialist at the elementary level, kind of feels it's a phones and sports things. Like reading is happening, it's just that reading isn't outside of schools isn't happening as much. What are your guys' thoughts on this?
This is I've done a whole webinar just on this topic, so there's so much to unpack. So if we think about our digital natives, a lot of them are addicted to their devices. So, you can kind of look at it through an addiction model lens to assess the extent to which students are addicted to their devices and the extent to which that's getting in the way of their reading. But there are really concrete strategies that we can teach them at the college level to kind of mediate like how to read a textbook, how to read and think critically, how to use different kinds of strategies to combat procrastination to enable them to do more sustained focused reading. I think reading on a screen can be challenging because of the hyperlinks and the cognitive overload. I'm feeling challenged to answer all of these questions because, like I said, I do have a upcoming webinar with another organization on 13 different strategies to help with college students to do that sustained focused reading. And there are no easy answers, right? There are so many barriers. Steph, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Yeah, the one thing I was thinking about is that students, like in the early years, they learn to read, right? K through or pre-K through 3, they're learning to read, and then education shifts to reading to learn, right? So acquisition of information, in previous generations, we would read textbooks. Now there's less incentive. They may not have built their competencies in reading to learn in those earlier years, especially for those who maybe had some challenges during the COVID years as well. But being able to do sustained reading in the same way as had been done in the past is not happening as much. I've been seeing students, they have these online textbooks where instead of reading a whole chapter, they can click around to find the answers to the quizzes without having a full sustained reading session or several reading sessions for one chapter. So I know that, yes, it's a challenge. It's something we're talking about every day in my center as well.
Excellent, thank you. All right, do we have any final questions today?
I do love these conversations because this reading one is, like I said, it's been all over the media and the higher ed publications all this last year. And it's something, if you talk to college professors, that everybody is really struggling with.
Yeah.
All right, last call. This has been an exciting crowd. It's like we've got people from all over and it's both educators and parents. So this has been a really fun webinar. All right. Well, it's looking like that wraps it up. Lori, Stephanie, did either of you have any final statements today?
No, just this was, like you said, a great conversation, and thanks so much to Kendall Hunt for pulling this together.
And we're just so this, student success is our passion, and we are just so excited for this book to come out to support parents and families, and really to help. It's a great tool for colleges and universities too, because it really helps colleges and universities with a strategy to help educate their parents and families to be autonomous, supportive parents. So it really does function to help create a partnership between universities and parents and families. So we're excited about it.
Yeah, as are we, as are we. Like I said, I've really enjoyed getting to get a sneak peek at it. Thank you both so much for joining us today. Everyone who attended, thank you so much. Like I said, we will be following up with you in the coming days with both a recording of this webinar that you can continue to reference, as well as that PDF kind of quick guide of references for these different strategies. So thank you again for joining us today, and I hope you all have a wonderful afternoon. Bye, everyone.
Bye,
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone.